All right, we're looking at Mark chapter 5. We talked last week that Mark's intention was always to show the power of God, of Christ as the servant of God. And really, in chapter 5, he is just one story after the other, demonstrating to us the power of Jesus Christ. Each time we read a miracle, we want to ask, what does this demonstrate about Jesus? And we want to also ask, how do people respond to it? You'll start to find a categorization of how the religious people respond and how the common people respond. So we see at the end of chapter 4 where Jesus has power over nature. He says to the winds and waves, peace be still. And so it is, the storm is calmed. He says to the waves in Job, this far and no further, O thou waves. And he can say to us in our cravings and our lustings and our desirings, this far and no further. The same power that can stop the wave is the same power that can stop us from falling from temptation, from sin, that kind of thinking. Then it shows us that he has power over demons in Mark chapter 5, verses 1 to 20. This is an interesting story. It's on the southeast corner of the Lake of Galilee, and you wonder, why did he go across the sea? It was as if he went across the sea for that one encounter, because that's the only encounter that's recorded. He went across the sea to this region that I don't even know if he's ever went there again or before, to the region of the Gadarenes. This was the area that the tribe of Gad had. And he's there and he meets with this demoniac, he delivers them and then leaves. Like, well, that's all you went there for? Yeah, that was the only thing that was the only purpose. That he will come and meet with us individually, that he will come intentionally. He'll go out of his way. And the whole story of that Gadarene demoniac is amazing. I mean, that was little Joe, who was in someone's Sunday school class just a couple of years back. Little Joe, the son of Mark and Mary. These are all names mixed up. Don't go looking for them in your scriptures. And now look at him. Nobody can restrain him. Chains cannot hold him. He is a raving lunatic. And he was a precocious child in Sunday school, but he was such a delight, kind of a thing. And now look at him. And so everybody knows his story. And there he is. Jesus comes, has an encounter with him, and delivers him. So that he's clothed. He's clothed. He's sitting. And he's in his right mind. And when was the last time that ever happened? And the way that happened is that Jesus encounters them. He sends the demons into the pig. 2,000 pigs run into the Sea of Galilee off the bluff. And the people who saw this, their eyes were agape and their mouth was like, what? And they fled and they ran into the city and they told everybody, you're not going to believe what happened. Oh, Joe. He's clothed and sitting and in his right mind. Like, what? That hasn't been since he was in kindergarten. Let's go check. And they run out there and it's exactly as they said. And there they see that little old Joe. And they turn to Jesus and says, please come into our town. Oh, we've got more sick people. We've got more people who are acting possessed. Come on. No. They were like, have you seen the price of pigs? Do you know what you've done? Our livelihood? The market right now, this is like cream of the crop, and you just put 2,000 into the, I don't know what their concern was really, but something compelled them to say, Jesus, would you please leave? I suspect there were some dissenters that thought, but what about Joe? Why would you ask him to leave? Let's have a party. But the mass of people said, no, do you know what those pigs were for? They were to feed the Roman army. We're not touching these pigs on our own accord because we have no regard for the law. We have regard for life. These pigs were going to feed the Roman army. And now, how are we going to explain 2,000 missing pigs? You know, so you can see their life flashing in front of them. You can appreciate that, right? So they asked Jesus to leave. And they asked him to leave just in the nick of time. Because if they had invited him to stay longer and to linger and to heal the masses over there in the Gadarene area, would he have made it in time for Jairus' little daughter? So God's timing here. They shoo him away. They get in a boat and they go across the seashore back to Capernaum. And this is what happens. Another interesting thing about the demoniac, after he's clothed, sitting and in his right mind, the townspeople try to shoo him away. The demoniac's trying to climb in the boat with him, like, hey, can I come along with you? It's like trying to get on a roller coaster ride. And the guy said, no, it's Phil, but I want to go with you. And Jesus says, no, I tell you what, I'm not going to let you go. But what I want you to do is to go home to your friends. There's something to be said that he can still claim to have had friends, even in that state of mind. He was possessed. He was brutal. He was cutting himself. There was blood everywhere. And yet Jesus could say, go home to your friends. What good friends, huh? And he says, go home to your friends and tell them what great things the Yahweh has done for you and how Jesus had compassion on you. And so the fella did exactly that. He departed and began to proclaim in the 10 cities all that Jesus had done for him. Go tell them what Yahweh has done for you. And he goes and tells them what Jesus had done for him. And they all marveled. So here he gives that man full liberty on the east side of the Jordan, there that's overrun by the Romans, and there's very few Jewish leaders over there. Go tell everybody what I did for you. And he did just that. Then we get to the west side of the Jordan River, the area of Galilee where religious leaders are to be found. And here it is. Now, when Jesus had crossed over again by boat, we're getting ready to read what's called a Markan sandwich. It's like you have the story, which is the bread of your sandwich, is Jairus. You lift off the piece of top bread, and there's the story of the woman with the issue of blood, right smack dab in the middle. And then it closes off with the bottom piece of bread, Jairus' daughter. It's a story within a story, and they call it a Markan sandwich narrative. So the beginning of it is, now when Jesus had crossed over again from the southeast shore where Gadarene was, by boat to the other side on the northwest corner by Capernaum, a great multitude gathered to him, and he was by the sea. He got off his boat and he could not even step inland. There was not space to go further on shore. He was pressed up against the sea. If any more just, like a domino pushed one person, he would have been in the sea, kind of a thing. He was by the sea. Where did this great crowd come from? Why did it come? Is it because they had heard about 2 nights ago how he calmed the storm and the waves? Is it because they heard about the demoniac who was delivered of 2,000 demons? Were the Romans coming in belly aching about, oh man, look at all that bacon wasted and all that sausage? What is it? Was it the tidal wave that 2,000 pigs going over the bluff falling into the Sea of Galilee would have created? Where'd that tsunami come from? 2,000 pigs just dove in. What gathered them there? We don't know. But they were there and they were waiting. How long they were waiting, I don't know. But there they were gathered at the sea there, so much so that Jesus could not step inland. And behold, one of the rulers of the synagogue came. But he had lost all dignity and propriety. You can imagine he was belting it. His wife probably said, okay, you can go see that lunatic. You can go see that man that all your colleagues are opposed to. Fine, but you better hurry because your daughter is near death. You can just imagine. I'm not saying women treat their husbands that way or give directives. I don't know these things. You can just picture it. Jairus' wife saying, but hurry back. And so I suspect he was running. This dignified, proper man, running to see Jesus. What must it have been like to have Jesus in your synagogue? You got pressure from the upper echelon saying, listen, I know he's smart and he knows the Torah, but don't let him teach. Well, we are having problems filling the kindergarten slot. Is he safe with kindergartners? No, not even kindergartners. Do not let him teach. So in one breath, he's like, got the upper echelons telling him, don't let him do anything. In another breath, the people are saying, we're just here to see Jesus. People who had never, ever been to the synagogue before. They're like, Jesus is there, and they're all showing up. So he's, church growth, he's doing great. But meanwhile, the upper echelon saying, get rid of the guy. So here poor Jairus is in this predicament. But when it came right down to it, his daughter's life was at stake. He ran to Jesus. This was costly for Jairus. It's going to cost him. His colleagues did not appreciate Jesus. He had a position. He had a job. He was the ruler of the synagogue. He already was in questionable standing with his colleagues because, after all, his synagogue was built by that Roman centurion who had gone to Jesus and said, "My servant's sick, just say the word and he'll be healed." And so I can't believe you let your synagogue be built by a Roman and a centurion at that, So he's already in questionable standing. And Jairus is like, there's nothing that a parental love will not do. It will not stop at anything. I don't care if it costs me my job. I don't care if it costs me my position. I don't care if I lose my reputation. My daughter's life is on the line. I am going to run to this lunatic. He's my only hope. And so this was costly to Jairus. And behold, one of the rulers of the synagogue came, Jairus by name. And when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet and begged. Matthew says, and he worshiped Jesus. And he begged him earnestly, saying, "My little daughter," Luke says, "my only little daughter, lies at the point of death." Matthew says she's already dead. She's as good as dead. It's done. That's how desperate they are. "Come and lay your hands on her, that she may be healed and she will live." Jairus threw everything to the wind in hopes of getting his daughter healed. He's maybe bemoaning the fact that he waited too late, too long. But he still came to Jesus. He sets out plainly for him what he wants. Maybe Jesus growing up said, "Hey, Jairus, can I teach Sunday school?" No. "Hey, Jairus, can I be an usher?" No. "Hey, Jairus, how about an acolyte?" No. And then Jairus comes to him with a request. And Jesus says, "Yes." Now, Jairus didn't have the same kind of faith that Roman Gentile centurion had, where he goes and say, "You just say the word and it's done." No, Jairus, he's like, I have heard that story, and the man who built my synagogues told me that story, but on my vision board, I have that Jesus is going to come. He's going to enter into my dignified house. He's going to lay his hand on my daughter, and then she's going to rise from the dead. He had a vision for it. It did not contain, let's say, the great faith that the Roman centurion had, but it had faith. And Jesus met him right where his faith was. Now, me, I'd be like, I'm waiting to see, is your faith going to be as good as the Roman centurion's? When it gets to the right quality, when it gets to the right quantity, maybe I'll meet your need. No, Jesus met him right where he was at. It says when he says, "Come and heal my little daughter and she will live," Jesus went with him. I love that about Jesus. He'll meet us right where we're at, where our faith is. Don't fear the quality or the quantity. Do I have enough? Is it even enough of a mustard seed? All these stories where people are getting healed, not all of them talk about faith. A third of them do not. It just happened. You're just like, why did that happen? Just because I'm God. That's what I do. And so Jesus met him right where he is. And so Jesus went with him, and a great multitude followed and thronged him. Now you can imagine as Jairus is coming up to Jesus and people saw him coming, you're like, whoa, he looks to be in a hurry, that the sea parted, much like the Red Sea before Moses' rod. And he was allowed entrance and direct access to Jesus. And then he falls down and he begs in front of everybody. That same crowd. So while he was getting clear access to Jesus, there was another woman who was emaciated, weakened, had a constant outflow of blood, but no inflow of blood. How she's still alive after 12 years, I know not. Talk about anemic. But she, maybe in her hoodie, goes up and manages to get up to Jesus. No clearing of the path for her. Maybe she didn't even want people to recognize who she was. No, she did not. But she manages to work her way up to Jesus in that weakened state. When our need is so desperate, strength is found. When we're at our weakest point, strength is to be had. In our weakness, his strength is made perfect. And this is a good demonstration of that. She's in a very weakened state, 12 years. And this is how it works. Jairus is thinking everything is going good. He agreed to go with me. I can't believe it. All those times I said no to him, but he's coming. This is exciting. He's maybe a few steps ahead of him. Come on, Jesus. And he's trying to get everybody out of the way. And then all of a sudden, a certain woman who had a flow of blood for 12 years and had suffered many things from many physicians. She had spent all that she had, her whole livelihood, and was no better, but rather grew worse. You have to feel sorry for her. 12 years of seeking, of following all those Facebook ads, of clicking on all those YouTube advertisements of this will make you better. Like, what does it hurt? I might as well try it. She lost everything. Now, last night's Bible study, someone had mentioned that they had heard someone suggest that this was the mother of the child and that she did not stop bleeding, and so she was ostracized. And then Jairus took another wife. I was like, that's fascinating, because both was 12 years ago. But that was just a thought someone had. I'd never entertained that thought before, so I thought I would share it with you. Both 12 years. 12 years she'd been doing this, but this was a costly thing. This is more than just the fact that she's got to put up with a 12-year period. It is more than that. What this had cost her, it is true that the Bible, the Old Testament talked about hygienic practices. You do need to be separated. You don't want to be touching the flow of blood. So separate. But by the time Jesus comes on the scene, people had added to it and explaining that this is because of immorality, or this is a pariah. They started attributing motives as to why this was happening and why there needed to be this separation. And lo and behold, it is no longer for the hygiene and the cleanliness of it. Now it's because they're wicked and you need to be separated from them. And so it doesn't take long for the husband to divorce her. The priest has to excommunicate her. The priest being Jairus. Jairus knew her. He kept hoping each time she came that it was going to be cleared up, and it was not. And he had to shoo her away, excommunicate her, ostracized from society. There goes Bunko. There goes women's Bible study. It is no more. You don't meet with them. No more book club. No society, no friends, no husband, no family, no religious gathering. She had lost all connection. You thought COVID was bad and the quarantine. Try 12 years of it by yourself. And that's what she was doing. The isolation, the desolation, the loneliness of it. She endured it for 12 years. And so I wonder if she knew she was interrupting, Jairus. Maybe at that point, it cost Jairus to come to Jesus. It didn't cost this woman anything. I mean, it sounds desperate, but what are they going to do? Excommunicate her? Check. Kick her out of the book club? Check. Divorce her? Check. Empty her bank account? Check. What? What is it going to cost this woman if she goes in, violates the Mosaic law, and actually touches people on her way in? I know I'm supposed to be off grid, but I can't help it. I heard about Jesus. It says, when she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his tassel, touched the hem of his garment, touched that blue thread. For she said, if only I may touch his clothes, I shall be made well. I shall be made whole. And immediately the fountain of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of the affliction. She had a superstitious faith, a faith really that didn't have precedence, that didn't have there's no directive that this could happen. She had come up with her own, it wasn't even in the National Enquirer. At least Jairus on his vision board had newspaper clippings. Simon Peter's mother-in-law got touched and she was raised from the dead. Maybe that'll happen with me. He's got evidence and backup for what he's asking Jesus to do. Where does this woman get off? Where did she come up with that idea? We get a little hint of it in Acts, but that's after her time, where handkerchiefs were healing people. She's just like, if I could just touch the garment. She objectified Christ. You know, women, we don't like to be objectified. She objectified Christ. All I got to do is touch that rabbit's foot. If I can just touch that rabbit's foot, I'll be healed. Where'd you come up with that superstition? That's just how I've been imagining it for 12 years. I've been imagining all kinds of different scenarios. You can imagine. She's imagining what healing would look like. But that's the one she went with. I'm going to risk it. And she thought, if I could just touch the object, not recognizing that it requires a will in order to dispense power. It requires a will that's full of love and goodness that says, I will be clean. But she goes up and touches it, and immediately she's made better. It's as if to say, Jesus says, yeah, you have a superstitious faith, but I'll meet you there. Your faith has made you whole. I'll meet your faith, just like he met Jairus's faith. That's not quite the Roman centurion's quality or quantity, but I'll meet you there. You have some mixed up doctrines and articles of faith, oh young woman, but I'll meet you there. I just love that about Jesus, how this power goes from him. Now, don't panic thinking, oh, I wonder if he's going to have enough power when he gets to Jairus's house. He's got like 6 ounces of power and he just used to on that woman. Oh no, and he stole it from him. It's like love. You'll never run out of love. You'll never run out. It's a constant inflow and outflow. And so it says, and Jesus, immediately knowing in himself that power had gone out of him, turned around in the crowd and said, who touched my clothes? Oftentimes, Jesus asks questions strictly for our sake. And he asked this question, and his disciples said to him, oh my gosh, why are we following this guy? Why are we devoted to him? What can we learn from him? He has absolutely no common sense. And he says, you see the multitude thronging you, and you ask, who touched me? Everybody touched you. And he looked around to see her who had done this thing. And so this idea of he's asking questions for our sake. He is providing opportunities. You know, there's a bajillion reasons why Jesus asked this question, but 3 of them are this, that he would be able to come forward and in the witness of all this crowd, they would recognize and testify she has been made whole. She is cured. Jesus doesn't tell her you got to go see the priest. The priest is there. The synagogue leader is there. And it's so an opportunity for everyone to know. Her bunco friends, her book club friends, the synagogue friends, her husband and family, she is whole. Second reason may be for the woman herself. She had snuck in, had touched the hem of the garment, and stole away with healing. Oh no, what if he's running short on power? What if I just stole this? She doesn't go away with a clear conscience. She kind of slinks away, doesn't know what's the next step. What am I to do? Who am I going to convince? How am I going to explain how it happened? She's got all these questions rushing in on her. And Jesus says, let me quell that. Let me say, peace be still to you. And so he calls her out and gives her an opportunity to say, you don't need to feel guilty about this. You don't need to feel like you stole something. And I'm going to give you the opportunity so that I can actually, after the fact, give you my will. And my will is you be clean, you be whole. But the third reason, I think the most important reason, at least for as far as Jairus is concerned, is he did it for Jairus' sake. He says to her, he looks around, he says, who had done this thing? But the woman, fearing and trembling, knowing what had happened to her, good girl, good girl. She came and fell down before him, just like Jairus did, and told him the whole truth, nothing but the truth. Told the whole story. And Jesus said to her, daughter, daughter. And she melted right there. I can't believe he called me daughter. I just stole from him. I just took without asking. And he says, daughter, your faith has made you whole. Go into peace. You may not be able to go into peace at your synagogue. They may still have issues against you. You may not go into peace at your family and at your book club, but you will be going into peace. That's your future. That's what it looks like. Go into peace. So he says, daughter, your faith has made you whole. Go into peace and be healed of your afflictions. And while he was still speaking, some came from the ruler of the synagogue's house who said, your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further? We know he can't do anything. And as soon as Jesus heard the word, this is what he said to the synagogue ruler. And remember what he said to the woman with the issue of blood. Her name's Veronica in tradition. Veronica. Daughter, your faith has made you whole. And he says to Jairus, who just heard that his daughter is dead, he says, do not fear, believe, and she will be made whole. And that comes from Luke, rendition of it. You saw how this woman's faith made her whole? Jairus, I'm asking you to believe, and your daughter will be made whole. Now, this kind of makes it seem like it's dependent on faith, and it's not dependent on faith, because you can imagine as Jairus and Jesus are returning to his house that he is fluctuating between believing and unbelief. Can this really happen? I can't believe I'm doing this. Maybe the religious leaders are joining the throng, the multitude of crowds, maybe up on the hillside looking down like, isn't that Jairus walking with that lunatic? And they're like, yeah. So have you ever had a double-minded faith? Am I the only one? Anyway, I'm imagining Jairus had a double-minded faith. I am going to get a tongue lashing when I get home from my wife. I'm going to be met with such sorrow. This is not going to work. It is too late, etc., etc. John chapter 11, Lazarus had not happened yet. He didn't have anything really to go on. But Jesus said, do not be afraid, believe, and she will be made whole. And so Jairus continues walking with him. When Jesus gets there, he permits no one to follow him except Peter, James, and John, and the brother of James. John is more popular today than James. So anyway, that designation of his name always throws me. Jesus came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue. It's interesting how often Mark keeps mentioning his position, and saw a tumult and those who wept and wailed loudly. This is the ruler of the synagogue, a community leader. His only daughter dies. And of course, there's wailing and weeping. Now, people like to talk about professional wailers and weeping. I don't think he need to hire any. He was an important man. He was significant enough. These people were weeping and wailing loudly. In Africa, when I was in Zambia, I had an 11th grade student die. He was in a canoe and he got eaten by a crocodile. And so we are having a funeral for him, and there is wailing and weeping and gnashing and noise. It just resounded, the whole village just lifted up with this noise. And I asked him why that I've never seen such emotion displayed like that. And he says, we do this so that the family has freedom to express their sorrow. We make such a commotion out here that as they are screaming at God, cursing maybe, and wailing, nobody's going to notice. We do it to distract attention from them so that they can have liberty to express their feelings. Now, I know we're Lutheran and German and Midwestern, but that's the way they were doing it in Zambia, and apparently the way they were doing it at this time. And so they're weeping, wailing, and they're full of sorrow. Jesus comes in and he says, when he came in, he said to them, why make this commotion and weep? The child is not dead, but sleeping. And they laughed him to scorn. They ridiculed him. Now we may think, how can they go from weeping and wailing to laughing him to scorn? Well, just imagine your husband just died and someone comes in and says, oh, he's just sleeping. Who let this lunatic in? Where did he come from? Who are you? How did you even get in here? And why are you making a mockery of us and our deepest sorrow like this? I mean, they're feeling like they're being bullied by Jesus coming in, trolling my Facebook page. Oh, he's just sleeping. What are you? This is desperate. This is one of the hardest moments in my life. My only child has died. And so they They want to put him out. Like, who invited you? And so we can understand their response. It's ludicrous. We've had confirmation from the doctor. We've gone in ourselves. There is no pulse. There is no breath. Rigor mortis is setting in. What do you mean she's just sleeping? So they're thinking they've been hijacked. Facebook accounts been hijacked and someone's trolling. And Jesus kicks them out. It's not that they had a negative response. It was not that they had a bad response. It makes perfect sense. And so Jesus says, I'm just going to have a private meeting with the daughter's mother, the daughter's father, and my 3 boys, Peter, James, and John. It's going to be a quiet setting. Maybe because of Jairus' position, And so he goes in. They ridiculed him. They laughed him to scorn. But when he had put them all outside, and there's some times where you just need to set up a boundary and say, step outside for right now. I want to meet with the family alone. And they ridiculed him. But when he had put them all outside, he took the father and the mother of the child and those who were with him and entered into where the child was lying. Then he took the child by the hand and said to her, Talitha Kumi, which is translated literally, little lamb, arise. Little lamb, I say to you, arise. It's interesting that as Jesus went into the synagogue ruler's house, he starts talking their language. This is what Jairus taught in Aramaic, a form of Hebrew. And as they taught in the synagogue in this Aramaic, everybody was talking Greek. Alexander the Great did a great job of Hellenizing the world and giving it a common language, which was perfect for the coming of the good news, a common language that everyone understood. But the Jewish people still taught in Aramaic, in this Hebrew language. And so when he got into the house, he spoke their language. When we do home visits, we want to meet them exactly where they're at. Meet them where their faith is at, whatever level, quantity, quality, whatever they have. They may have some weird ideas as we would judge it. We can allow for that. Jesus met them where they're at. All I have to do is touch the hem of his garment and I'll be made healed. Okay? We speak their language. Sometimes we have to put our Christianese aside and speak their. I'm not talking vulgarity and go, whoa, I'm just saying. He went into Aramaic and said, Talitha Kumi, little lamb, arise. To go into the person's house, meet them where they're at, not judging their faith, not judging their position. Well, he's a synagogue leader, and we know the religious leaders don't like me, so no, I'm not going to your house. And don't judge their language. However their language may be about. It may be postmodern. It may be atheistic in some respects. It may be new age. Meet them where they're at. Jesus did. Talitha Kumi, which is translated little lamb, arise, and immediately the girl arose and walked. For she was 12 years of age. And they were overcome with great amazement, from wailing to laughing to scorn to amazement. And he commanded them strictly that no one should know about it, and said something should be given her to eat. It's like, you know what? Yes, Jesus just met with you and you had an incredible rising and raising from the dead, but we are back to practicality. Give this girl something to eat. We may all wish we'd never have to eat again, never have to sleep again, never have to take a shower again. But Jesus says, give her something to eat. We're going to meet her practically. Now, I sometimes think that the reason Jesus says on the east side, he said to the demoniac who was delivered, you go tell everybody. Nobody's over there. No religious leaders. And then on this side of the river, on the west side, he says, don't tell anybody. And one of the reasons could be that he did not want Jairus to necessarily lose his job. Like, Jairus, don't feel compelled to confess this to anybody. Don't feel compelled to testify to your colleagues. You'll never believe what Jesus did. You stick with your job. And when you go to synagogue and you open the Torah, you'll be reading it and discussing it in a new light. And they'll have ears to hear. We get a hint of this kind of attitude by God from 2 Kings chapter 5, where Naaman gets healed. And he wants to take some of the soil from Israel to Syria. And he says, it may happen accidentally that I'll end up bowing down to Rimmon, the false god. And Elijah says, what is that to me? It's in your heart, kind of. Anyway, he commanded them strictly that no one should know it, whether it was for Jairus' sake or whether it's just for the sake of keeping his publicity down until it's time. He said, keep it a secret. In the book of Mark, we see Jesus oftentimes saying, don't let it be known just yet. People are have a different definition of what they think the Messiah is. And until we get that rectified, don't let it be known. So when we do home visits, the idea is this: meet people where they are at. It is so tempting to judge people where their faith is, what language they use, and what position they are in. Meet people where they're at. Maybe we'll see a rising of a little lamb. Let's pray. Gracious God, we are so thankful. One thing that we can say, we identify with these people because we are in need. We all are in need. And we're just so thankful that just as you were there for them, you are here for us. Whether it be a physical sickness, a spiritual sickness, a dryness in our bones, Lord, you have invited us. We can come boldly to the throne of grace and ask for help in time of need, asking for mercy. And Lord, we're thankful for this invitation. We're thankful that you're there. We want to be like that woman, and we want to be like Jairus that come. But we're also thankful, Lord, that even sometimes when we're unable to come, that you still rise and come. We sometimes feel like that little girl. The only people coming to you is not ourselves, but someone on our behalf. Lord, if that should be us, if we should be a Jairus coming to you on behalf of someone else, Lord, that you would strengthen us, show us, and that we would be faithful to it. Even that demoniac. After all the cutting and the raging and the lunacy, he still had friends. Whew. Help us to be so, Lord. Help us to be so. There's just so much here that we're challenged by and comforted by and consoled by, Lord. And we pray that it would draw our minds heavenward, that it would cause us to fall for you more and more, to see your beauty, that we wouldn't be able to talk about much else but you. But Lord, this week, as we do our homework on Mark chapter 7, pray that you would meet with us, that there would be a touching, that you would help us generate a vision board of how we can see you working in ministry, in life, in our profession, in our relationships, in every area that you seem to care about, that it would always center around you. We love you, Lord Jesus, and we are grateful. And we just desire to be ever more grateful and ever more loving. Amen.